Hello everybody. Tis Saturday, December 2nd. We didn't feed Lourdes on Friday because I was busy. I don't think Lourdes really give two hoots. These are European nightcrawlers. Let's see how they're doing. I don't see any worms. This is bad. There's worms. Oh, lots of worms. They were at the food. Hello, Europeans. So they're in the food big time. Banana, not so much. But if you remember last time we gave them some watermelon, I would guess that's where they're at. Drinking up the watermelon because there's no watermelon left. We will make them happy. Give them more watermelon. But we're going to give them a little more bedding too. It's very wet in there. It is very wet in there. As far as I don't drill holes in my tubs for the water to drain. I moderate my moisture with new bedding, dry bedding. And then they do it themselves. So we freeze all of our food. I've had a couple comments along the way. It's starting to warm up on my channel here, so different people are commenting, and so I'll address some of those comments. One fella said he chops everything up in a blender. I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to keep it simple. So I freeze everything, which breaks the cell walls. It's a very similar procedure. It may not look it, but this stuff's going in froze. After a day or two, it just turns into mush because all of the cell walls are broken down. Throw a little more paper on there and bury the banana with the old food. If you notice, I always start with my European night crawlers because this way I don't cross-contaminate the to the red wigglers because I want to keep my Europeans clean, so to speak. I want to keep them just Europeans. Pure Europeans. I don't know if there's ever such a thing. But that's why I always start with my European nightcrawler. Oh, there's a dried out one. We didn't make it. Must have got stuck up in the plastic. It happens. You don't save them all. If you think you're going to, well, it just doesn't happen. One thing I noticed this time, this bin used to have a lot of gnats. And I set up a gnat trap. It's all that is a little bit of apple cider vinegar. And if you look into the bottom of it, sometimes you can kind of see that it's caught some.
Yeah.
Anyway, seems to have not eliminated them, but definitely thinned them down. Because last time when I opened them, there was quite a few. This time there's not. So, these guys are done. So this is our new red wiggler breeder bin. And it's small. Like it's only half the size of my buckets over there. I have 220 worms that I counted out in here. So there's ish of 220 worms, right? Could be 225. I may have repeated a couple of numbers. Let's see. This is the first time in 3 days. We set this up 3 days ago. Let's see what we got in here. What they're doing. They seem to be all down in the bedding. They're there. They're spread out, which is what you want. You want them to be spread out. And ready to go to work and doing their worm things, right? And that's pretty wet, so I'm just not gonna use that yet. Just gonna put a little bit in there, and I'm gonna give them some potato peel and some carrot. Remember, there's only 220 worms in here, right? So we don't want to overfeed them because they just started, but we want to get them to a zone where they can all meet up, do their little breeding thing, come out, make us some cocoons and some worms, and you know, get the process happening again. It sucks because the last breeder bin I had was working out really well, and I made a mistake. I left the lid closed too tight. When I went back and watched the video on when we fed them last, I tightened it up too much. So, it is my fault. And no one else's. But when you have an open bin like this, there's no chance of that. There's always air able to get around. And I highly suggest just using open bins. You can do what you want. But in my unexpert opinion, open bins is the way to go. So, before we go to these, next, are you helping? We will do, these guys are my worms of my brooder bin. And my brooder bin is from my previous breeder bin, 3 months worth of breeder bin put into this. And the last time we fed them in the middle, and we put some new bedding. Obviously it's still wet enough for pumpkins to germinate down there. But let's see what's happening. Zoom in. Oh my. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to achieve this, but that guy right there is a baby worm. And he's not the most baby worm that they can be. They come out smaller than that.
Yeah.
There's some more. So, in that little spot, there's 2 or 3. And that's just one spot. So this bin is getting super active and super, I mean, look in here. These are not potworms. These are worms.
Yeah, those are worms.
Those are worms that hatched in the last week. And those little white fellas, just the size of hairs, are worms. Are red wigglers. So this bin is all red wigglers, or it should be, because when I chose my worms for my breeder bin, I went through and I picked just red wigglers. Busy.
Yeah.
These are all eggs and cocoons. Wow. Look at that. That is wild.
They're all over.
So we still have some banana. We still have a little bit of, I'd say, watermelon rind there. See? Watermelon. They love watermelon. That's busy. That's busy. So breeder bins work. Breeder bins work. This is the future of the red wigglers at my place, because these guys, we've got them all the way from this size down to hares. In another couple of months, wisps, the babies are called wisps, in another month to 2 months, there's going to be all sorts of breeders in here, in this bin themselves. Plus, we just started another breeder bin, so we're going to add to this as we go. It's going to be super active. Crazy active. And the projects that I want to do are more, I mean, it doesn't matter what worms, but if I sell worms, I want to sell red wigglers, or I want to sell European nightcrawlers. I do not want to sell Indian blues. And I'm not sure if I have any Indian blues left in here. I'm pretty sure I did when I first got my worms from, let's just say the place.
It's up left unnamed.
The place that we got our worms from, there was a mix of worms. And I know there was Indian blues in there, because in the first week we had worms leaving on the floor, drying up on the floor, and doing the mass exodus like Indian blues do. And they were very agitated, very much, they're smaller than, maybe not shorter, but smaller than the reds. And I think they mostly just left. If there's any left in here, there's not very many. So we're going to give these guys pretty good feeding, because we gave them a real good feeding last time, and they have nothing left but a little bit of that banana, which banana can kind of take a while when you throw it in whole. And we're going to give them some potato peels.
Have we got the zoomies next?
And we're going to leave it at that. There's lots of paper and there's lots of coffee in here. We could give them a little more coffee. Coffee never hurts. It keeps them up at night when they go to work. Give them a caffeine buzz. Ha ha. That was ha ha, by the way. I was joking. I honestly don't know if they get a caffeine buzz or not. I don't think they care as long as it's food. Okay, there's some onion peels, and right next to it, there's worms in the cardboard amongst it. I had a fella, or someone, I think it may have been a lady, commented to me and said I would do better to keep the onions out of my bin. And that is possible. It's not going to happen here, because what we're doing is we're keeping it on the simple side, and we are putting our kitchen waste, whatever it is, into the bins. Now, I've put citrus into the bins, especially into the guys where they're really active, the big bin, and they they go around it for the first couple of weeks. But the rest of the microbes in the bin eventually start breaking down that citrus or that onion or that piece of garlic. And then the worms can use it. And to simplify things, I just don't avoid onion, because in the greater scheme of things, what I'm planning on doing is creating an outdoor worm row or compost row that the worms go into it. And my experiment would be in our climate. We live in southern Saskatchewan in Canada. We get 35 and 40 below Celsius winters, and we get 35 and 40 above Celsius summers. So I want to see if I can make it work outdoors in a large scale system. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Large scale, not under the bed. This is fun, and probably will always be 1 or 2 bins underneath the bed.
We didn't discuss that.
But the biggest part of what my project is to get enough worms to be able to try my projects outside. And believe it or not, it don't take that many worms to start outside projects, because if you've got the right conditions, they're going to go wild, and they're going to multiply and have a lot of fun and do their thing. So now I'm going to throw this stuff that's kind of spilled over and could possibly have European night crawlers in it, because this is the cocoons and babies out of the castings of the guys. So there could be anything in here. There could be African night crawler, or probably not African night crawler. I don't think I've ever seen one. European night crawler, Indian blue, or red wiggler. And there may even be a different type of worm in here that just isn't all that active. They're shorter, and they get fat, like almost as fat as your little finger, but they just don't do much. So let's have a look in here. Now these have already got breeders in here. That's a breeder. Now this bin came just from sifting the castings of the guys, and what went through the screens the first time, and we picked out the worms that went through the screens. That's what's in here, and cocoons, and whatever baby worms. There's a lot of worms in here. All sizes. I'm impressed with how this has come along, because this bin's not very old. This bin's only a month and a half old, maybe 2 months old, and that's mostly just come out of the from the sifter. And like, this is starting to feel moist. I put the dried away from the food, and the plastic covers it, and your moisture spreads out through the bin. So these guys are looking good, but they need food. They need food because there's worms in there, and they're hungry, and they want their damn breakfast. I always try to put a little bit of bedding in. Another thing, forgot it downstairs. We'll do it next week. Every once in a while, I put eggshell in, crushed eggshell, and that gives them their calcium, and that gives them their grit. And if your bin happens to be a little bit acidic, which it can happen, I guess. I don't know. I don't have a pH tester. I haven't invested in one yet. Probably should do that. But if your bin's a little acidic, the calcium in the eggshells will help to buffer that. Okay, we had a little glitch. Phone had a little bit too much video in it. So we finished up that bin, putting it away. This is the cocoons and babies from the guys. That's that one. Fat guys. So these are the ones that I said some other kind of worm came in our original worm setup, and these are them. I think there's like 8 or 10 worms in this bin, and I never see too much for babies, never see too much for cocoons, never see too much activity. Now, I just don't know what kind of worm that is. Whether it's a European nightcrawler. I doubt it, because they're not active enough. They're not breeding enough. I don't see cocoons, although there's only a few worms in here. I get it. You'd think you'd see some after all this time, because I've had them separated for months. I don't see no cocoons. Anyway, it's not a big deal. We'll give them a little feeding. Last week we didn't. Like I said, not many worms in here. Let's not kill them with kindness. Not sure what's ever going to happen to this. It's kind of a wait and see thing. Not much happening with this one. Okay. The main event.
The guys.
The guys. The guys are our main bin. Most active bin. So we just did a harvest last week.
Okay.
Is that something going on with my camera? I guess I got to clean it up. The guys bin is our most active bin, and it is our, we did a huge harvest last time. We took out like this much of the castings, and we did that in a video. Go back and watch it. It's pretty cool. A lot of them. So then I came in after that, and I pulled out the 220 breeders from that are in the new breeder bin. I don't think these ones care, because there's a lot of worms in here, and they're busy. They're doing what they need to do. Look at how many worms there is when you pull this paper back. There is a lot of worms in this bin. And when they get a fresh bunch of bedding and they get out of their old castings and they get new kind of rejuvenated bedding, this is what happens. They get busy. They like new bedding. Just like you like new bedding when you go to bed. This is kind of fun. There's worms everywhere I look. So when we, yep, there's lots of babies in here. Lots of juveniles, lots of babies, lots of breeders. They're busy. There's a lot of worms in this bin. I'm pretty happy with the way this bin is working out. And it's cool over here.
And this was your trial bin.
This was my bin. This was our very first bin we set up. And it's busy. A lot of worms. Every handful.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, you know, in places 50, 100 worms plus in a handful. So we mix this stuff up usually once a week. This week they've been kind of bothered a little more because we pulled castings. And then I harvested a couple hundred worms to start a new breeder bin. They don't seem to care. They're very busy. We're having a lot of problems with my phone right now. It's clicking back out. So we're going to probably have about 4 videos to upload.
All about 3 minutes long.
So it's pretty frustrating. And I'm trying to hurry this up, but you just can't because there's so many worms and there's so much fun. That is a handful. We're into some old food. That's old melon. And there's a slight odor once you disturb it. There was no odor when I opened the bin. So you don't, when you go down and find the spot where the food was, you may smell a little something. I've also been feeding them very heavily because there's a lot of worms in here. So that being said, here's my turnip. It's getting squishy, but it's not squishy enough to get broke down. All right, so we're just gonna settle this stuff in. I am so impressed with how many worms I'm seeing. Like, I am seeing worms everywhere. Like, literally just everywhere. All sizes. All actively feeding and breeding and feeding and just giving her. This is a fun bin to check. I really enjoy checking this bin. Okay, let's get some food to them. So, give them coffee. My worms get a lot of coffee. They seem to really enjoy it. Like I said before, we freeze all our stuff. Then we feed them. It breaks the cell walls. And everything kind of comes together. Watermelon.
If this times out the way it has been, we've got about 47 seconds.
That sucks. Watermelon. Okay, if this time's out, I'm just going to cover this up and call this a video. If it doesn't time out, I'm going to cover this up and call it a video. Pretty good feeding. One more for good measure because there's a lot of worms in here. So like I said before, everything I do, I pull this way. I feed it this end only. And we just go back and start covering. And that is our
Subscribe.
Like, subscribe, share, send me some comments.